The first time I noticed him, he was just a shadow beneath the broken parking lot light, standing dead still, his head tilted up toward my room, as if he'd been waiting for me to look out. By the third time I checked, hours later, he hadn't moved an inch. I was halfway through a long drive west, too restless to sleep in my car, but too broke to afford comfort. The roadside motel I stopped at wasn't a T much to look at. Half the letters on its flickering sign were burned out, and the front office smelled faintly of bleach and cigarette smoke. Still, the clerk barely looked up, slid me a key, and mumbled, "Room 9. The room was small, stiff, the kind you don't bother inspecting because you already know it. It's a compromise. A sagging mattress. Air conditioner rattling against the wall and curtains so thin they may as well not have been there at all. I parked directly beneath the window to keep an eye on my car, a habit drilled into me from too many solo road trips. That's when I first saw him. A figure standing directly under the only streetlight in the empty lot. He had his hands jammed into his pockets, shoulders stiff, head angled just enough to make me feel certain his eyes were on me. The lamp above him flickered intermittently, throwing his body in and out of clarity. At first, I told myself it was just another guest, maybe smoking, maybe talking on the phone, talking. But after several long minutes, when he hadn't moved or reached for anything, the air in my chest grew tight. I let the curtain drop. Maybe 20 minutes later, restless and unsettled, I peeked again. Same figure, same stance, same stillness. The lot was otherwise empty. Not a car, not a sound, just him. I pulled the curtain shut harder this time, trying to sleep instead. Every squeak of the AC unit made me twitch. At one point I swore I heard gravel crunch, faint but deliberate, as if a foot shifted weight outside. Holding my breath, I checked again. Still standing there under the light, in the exact same way as before. I sat back on the edge of the bed, rubbing my temples, my body practically buzzing with unease. Night travel makes you paranoid, I told myself. But my gut knew better. There was something deeply wrong about how motionless he was, as though he wasn't really waiting for anything except me to notice. Hours crawled by. Sometime after 2 a.m., I must have dozed off because I woke with my heart pounding, aware that something had startled me. An unnatural quiet pressed against my ears. No cars passing on the highway, no hum of crickets outside. Just silence. I didn't want to, but I looked. This time he wasn't under the light. My breath stalled as my eyes darted across the lot, the shadows stretching deep into its corners. Then I found him, shifted just enough closer, standing now near the middle of the lot, directly beneath my window's line of sight. His face was clearer now, but that didn't help. What unsettled me wasn't his expression, but the void of it. Like his features refused to sharpen, no matter how hard I tried to focus. As if the details themselves resisted recognition. I stumbled backward from the blinds, heart hammering against my ribs. Whoever he wasn't just standing, he was drawing closer. The knocking began at 3:07, not at first loud, just slow, deliberate taps on the glass of the window itself. The blinds trembled lightly with each one, as though daring me to part them again. I sat frozen across the room, staring at the vibrating curtains, the faint shadow of his figure leaking through. The knocking didn't stop. I wanted to shout, demand he leave, threaten to call the police, but my throat clicked uselessly, no sound coming out. After what felt like forever, the tapping changed, louder, a flat, open-handed pounding against the glass. The thin curtains shook with the rhythm, each slam making me feel the window might shatter inward. Still no words, no voice, just pounding. I shuffled toward the door to escape, fumbling with the handle, but froze when I realized a small beam of light from the parking lot spilled under the door. And in that glow, two shadows stretched long against the carpet, mine and another's. There was nothing outside my door, nothing I could hear. But the shape on the floor was unmistakable. He was standing there, right behind it. I let go of the handle in pure terror, stumbling backward until my legs hit the bed frame. The pounding on the glass stopped suddenly, replaced with silence. For a long time I didn't breathe, didn't move. And then, slowly, my curiosity got the better of me. Shaking, I inched back to the window, pushed one finger to the blinds and pulled them back only a sliver. Empty lot. No one there. But pressed against the glass itself, directly where my head leaned, was the imprint of a face. Fogged against the window, as if someone had leaned there too long, staring in. I recoiled, heart exploding in my chest. The imprint was still fresh, moist, fading slow. I didn't sleep again. The moment the faintest sunrise bled across the cracked blinds, I grabbed my bag, threw it into the car, and sped off the lot without a backward glance. Only once, miles down the highway, I dared to check my mirrors, and beneath a lonesome streetlight at the last crest of the road, a figure stood perfectly still, shoulders squared, head tilted up, watching me drive away. The receptionist's voice was calm, almost casual when he leaned closer to hand me my room key and said, "If someone knocks on your door tonight, don't open it. Don't even answer." I laughed softly, but the way his eyes lingered a second longer told me he wasn't joking. I had been on the road all day, the kind of grueling drive where the world blurs into headlights, endless asphalt, and the occasional gas station. By the time I rolled into the small-town motel, exhaustion had me by the throat. All I wanted was a bed, a shower, maybe a few hours of dreamless sleep. The lobby was brightly lit, in stark contrast to the emptiness of the parking lot outside. A musty air clung to the carpet, mixed with the faint scent of insecticide. Behind the counter sat a young man with sharp cheekbones and weary eyes. He barely glanced up as I checked in, typing slowly on his ancient computer before telling me my room. That was when he gave me the warning. His tone was matter-of-fact, as though he was reminding me of breakfast hours or checkout policy. My tired brain lagged behind his words. What was that? I chuckled nervously. His eyes flicked up at mine, completely serious. Just don't open the door if you hear knocking. I waited for him to smirk, to let on that it was some local joke at the tourist's expense. But he didn't. He just pointed to the key, then went back to his paperwork as if nothing was strange. Room 12. Second floor, far end of the hall. The climb upstairs seemed quiet, too quiet for a motel. No televisions, no voices, nothing but the steady buzzing of fluorescent bulbs overhead. The hallway's carpet muffled my steps, though something about it felt spongy, damp in patches. When I reached my door, I hesitated with the key card in my hand, half expecting to hear movement inside. There was none. The room was plain but serviceable. Faded curtains, a heavy bedspread patterned in dated green swirls. The air conditioner struggled noisily in the corner, pushing tepid gusts of stale air. Still, I bolted the lock, drew the curtains, and sat down on the edge of the mattress, replaying the odd warning in my head. Night fell quickly. I flipped through television static before settling on nothing. By midnight, the silence thickened to the point where I could hear my own breathing too loudly in the room. The digital clock glowed red on the nightstand, 12:41. When the first knock came, it was so soft I almost thought I imagined it. 3 distinct taps against the door. I froze. Every ounce of me knew it was late. Too late for housekeeping. Too late for guests at the wrong door. My stomach tightened with the memory of the receptionist's instruction. Don't open it. Don't answer. I waited, silent, my ears straining. The hum of the AC. The faint buzz of the fluorescent light in the bathroom. Then nothing. 20 minutes passed. I told myself maybe it had been my exhaustion. A dream while half asleep. I turned on my side, eyes closing. Bang, bang, bang. My body shot upright. This time it wasn't soft. It was deliberate, forceful, shaking the thin wood of the door in its frame. I tiptoed closer, every nerve screaming not to, but I had to know. Peering through the peephole, my breath hitched. The hallway was empty. No shadows. No footsteps retreating. Just the empty corridor stretching beneath the fluorescent glow. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. My hands pressed over my ears as though that could block out the possibility of another knock. Minutes passed. Silence. Slowly, my racing heart began to steady, though my body remained tight as coiled wire. At 3:07 a.m., the pounding began. This time it was relentless. Open-handed slams against the door, rattling the frame, shaking the handle with the force of each strike. my chest seized in panic. Whoever or whatever was outside didn't want my attention. It wanted in. I pressed myself against the farthest wall, my eyes locked on the handle. It trembled as though someone was twisting it, but the metal bolt held. Sweat chilled my skin. I thought of calling the front desk, but the idea of speaking, of making any sound at all, felt like it would invite something through the door. The pounding didn't stop. Every slam felt synchronized, too deliberate, as though there was no hand behind it but something mechanical, timed. There was no shouting, no voice demanding entry, just the steady, brutal hammering against the wood, demanding acknowledgement. And then, silence. I waited, holding my breath, afraid even to exhale. My ears rang in the void the pounding left behind. Inch by inch, I crept toward the peephole again. I shouldn't have, but I had to. Through the fisheye glass, I saw it. Someone was standing there after all. Too close. So close their face was pressed against the peephole itself. But what I saw wasn't really a face. It was a blurred, stretched smudge of features, like someone pressed a wet photograph against glass and smeared it with a hand. The only thing I could make out was an eye, too large, staring straight into mine. I stumbled backward, landing hard against the chair, hard in free fall. The pounding resumed instantly, louder, furious now, shaking the hinges. It felt like the door would splinter apart. I clutched my phone, tried dialing 911, but the call wouldn't go through. No signal, no dialing tone, just dead static in my ear. I don't remember falling asleep, but at some point exhaustion must have dragged me under. When the gray wash of dawn lit the room, the door was still intact, the hallway silent again. I left without showering, without brushing my teeth, throwing my bag over my shoulder and rushing down the hallway like prey. At the desk, the same receptionist looked up at me with that expressionless face. "Everything all right with your stay?" he asked casually. I wanted to scream at him, to ask what that was, who was outside my door. But I couldn't. I just stared. Finally, he gave a small smile, like he'd expected this. "Good. You didn't answer." His eyes flicked to the wall behind me as if checking for something. I spun to look, nothing but the lobby's blank hallway, then turned back. But he wasn't behind the desk anymore. The chair was empty, the coffee cup he'd been holding still steaming on the counter. I didn't stick around to wonder how he'd vanished. I left, speeding until the town was nothing but a shrinking blur in my rearview mirror. Even now, years later, I can still feel the tremors of that door under my skin, the way the pounding echoed deep inside me long after it stopped. And some nights, when I'm alone in bed, the sound finds me again. 3 deliberate knocks, waiting. The GPS froze on a black screen mid-drive, then blinked back to life with a single arrow pointing to an exit I don't remember seeing on the map. At the end of the desolate ramp, a flickering neon sign glowed red against the night. Vacancy. I had been driving for hours, the kind of endless highway stretch that dulls you into autopilot. My music cut in and out, service was gone, and the road dipped into a black nothing between stretches of desert. When the GPS rerouted itself to that tiny exit, my first instinct was annoyance. I hadn't asked it to redirect, but fatigue and desperation overruled logic. The sign was the only landmark for miles. Vacancy. Just that word coughing out light into the dark. The motel it belonged to rose behind it, long, low, and silent. The paint peeled in strips like sunburned skin, and the lot was completely empty. No cars, no lights in the windows. I pulled in anyway. Relief outweighed unease. But as I killed the engine, the silence hit me. No crickets, no passing trucks, just the flat hum of the neon sign. The lobby doors were locked, the windows dark. A small key box sat bolted to the wall with a faded note taped above it. Choose any room. Keys inside. That should have sent me back into the car. It didn't. I opened the box. Inside, only one key remained. Metal, heavy, with a brass tag etched with the number 6. Room 6 was halfway down the strip, door painted the same dull beige as the rest. The air was warm and stale when I opened it, carrying that dry, dusty smell of abandonment. And it was empty, completely stripped. No carpet, only concrete floors. No lamps, no curtains, just bare walls stained with past outlines of furniture. The only thing in the room was a bed frame pushed into the corner, a sagging mattress on top, and across from it, a full-length mirror, bolted to the wall, facing directly toward the bed. Something about that detail made my stomach clench. Still, exhaustion drove me forward. I dropped my bag on the mattress, sat cross-legged, and tried to convince myself this was better than falling asleep on the highway. My reflection stared back at me, warped slightly in the wavering glass. An hour passed. I tried to sleep, but each time my eyelids shut, I felt drawn to peek at the mirror. The reflection seemed too sharp against the dim room, the shadows at my back darker than they should have been. Then came the sound, faint, measured, like the creak of a floorboard somewhere inside the walls. I sat perfectly still, straining my ears. Another creak, closer. Not behind the door, behind the mirror. My throat went dry. The glass trembled slightly, as if touched. I scrambled to the window, yanking back the blinds, only to find that behind them there was no glass, no exit, just solid wall. The breath punched out of me. Turning back, I saw that my reflection was no longer aligned with my movements. I leaned left. It lagged, just a fraction of a second too slow. Then it leaned back, perfectly upright, while I stood frozen. I grabbed my bag, heart slamming against my ribs. But when I spun for the door, the knob refused to budge. Jammed, rusted solid. Behind me came the soft drag of fingernails down glass. I turned. The reflection pressed both palms against the inside of the mirror, eyes wide, mouth opening slowly like it was trying to scream without sound. My body stood frozen, paralyzed, as though moving meant acknowledging it was real. The lights flickered. Once, twice, then died completely. I ran blind for the door, pounding against it until my fists ached. The echo of my own hammering, though, didn't sound right. It was muffled, distorted, like I wasn't in that room alone anymore. Then the faintest voice, behind me, or inside the glass. Stay. I don't remember how I got out. The next clear image is stumbling into the parking lot, gasping in the humid night air, my car still sitting untouched. The key to room 6 was clenched in my fist so tightly it left grooves in my skin. The motel looked dead again. No lights, no sign. The vacancy letters had gone dark, as if they'd never been on at all. I drove until dawn, not daring to stop, scanning every mirror in my car with a sick terror that I'd glimpse another face staring back. I've checked maps since then. There is no exit where I pulled off, no record of that motel ever existing. But the key, I still have it. Heavy, cold, etched with the number 6. And some nights when the house is quiet, I swear I hear the soft scrape of fingernails against glass, waiting,